June 4, 1943. Railroad Street, Mexia, Texas. A pencil trembled in the hand of Unifitzia Vera Burkhart as he scribbled in his hidden diary. Every word was dangerous. If discovered, solitary confinement would be his reward. Yet he wrote nonetheless, the Americans must be lying. No nation could have this much wealth even while fighting a war on two fronts. Outside the train window, the Texas night was ablaze with electricity. Every farmhouse, every street corner, every shop glowed in defiance of everything the Nazis had told him. In Germany, blackout regulations had plunged entire regions into darkness since 1940. Rural electrification barely touched a fifth of German farms. Yet here, in what German propaganda had insisted was a decadent, collapsing America, light flowed freely like water. The train screeched to a halt, and 1,850 veterans of the Afrika Korps stepped down. Not in cramped cattle cars, not in freight wagons, but cushioned Pullman coaches with sleeping berths and dining cars. The town of Mahia had come out to see them. What no one knew then was that this arrival would mark the beginning of a psychological revolution, a systematic dismantling of Nazi beliefs through sheer exposure to American abundance and efficiency. The reality of American industrial might was a weapon far more powerful than any battlefield victory. The collapse had begun months earlier, on May 13, 1943, when General Jürgen von Arnim surrendered in Tunisia along with 250,000 to 275,000 German and Italian soldiers. These were the Wehrmacht's most seasoned desert fighters, men who had driven the British back to Egypt and earned the grudging respect of General Montgomery himself. Among them was Hetman Friedrich Radke, Iron Cross recipient, battle-hardened veteran of France and North Africa. His diary, later discovered in the U.S. National Archives, would provide historians with the most intimate view of the psychological impact of American captivity on German soldiers. Oran, Algeria. Radke and 30,000 other prisoners waited for transport ships. Here the first shock awaited them. The U.S. Army processed prisoners with efficiency that no German officer had ever imagined. Identity cards were photographed and filed, medical exams completed, inoculations administered, Geneva Convention rights explained in flawless German. Every step, precise, systematic, and organized, already a challenge to their preconceptions of enemy weakness. But nothing prepared them for the food. Oberreiter Hans Muir of the 21st Panzer Division later wrote to his mother. While we waited in Oran, the Americans fed us better than we had eaten in 6 months of desert warfare. White bread, real coffee, meat twice a day. We thought it was propaganda, an attempt to impress us. We didn't realize it was standard procedure. Then came the Liberty ships. The SS Robert E. Peary, built in 4 days and 15 hours at Kaiser Shipyards in Richmond, California, seemed to defy reality itself. Ships like these, produced at the rate of 3 per day, returned from delivering supplies to the European theater, carrying up to 30,000 prisoners per month. The Atlantic crossing in July 1943 was the next stage in the mental dismantling of Nazi ideology. Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann of the 90th Light Division noted in letters home how American sailors discarded more food each day than his company had received in weeks. Half-eaten steaks, loaves of bread, gallons of milk, wasted casually, not out of malice, but because the supply was inexhaustible. The prisoners realized quickly, these Americans were not poor, desperate, or constrained. They were unimaginably wealthy and organized. The ships themselves were floating classrooms in American power. Radke and his fellow prisoners learned the SS Robert E. Peary was one of 2,710 Liberty ships built during the war, each requiring 250,000 parts from 32 states. The engines alone were manufactured in 3 separate plants, each cylinder generating 900 horsepower before final assembly in ports built barely 2 years prior. Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Stauburn, scion of a Prussian military family, would later write, "As our ship approached the American coast, I watched the radar antenna spinning above the bridge. This technology, which we thought only we or perhaps the British possessed, was standard on a cargo vessel. Then I realized we had already lost this war." August 2, 1943. Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. The first view of America shattered every illusion Nazi propaganda had built. The base sprawled across 4,300 acres. Cranes loaded and unloaded dozens of ships simultaneously. One port handled more cargo in a single day than Hamburg did in a week. Prisoners gaped. Gerrit Jon Vber, a factory worker before the war, noted in his secret diary 47 cargo ships at various stages of loading, each crane lifting weights that would have required a dozen men in Germany. The march to the trains took them past civilian parking lots filled with automobiles, ordinary workers' cars. In Germany, private ownership was a privilege for party elites, while the Volkswagen remained largely a propaganda promise. Here, laborers drove to work. But the train itself was another revelation. Not boxcars, not 40-and-8 wagons. Pullman coaches. Padded seats that converted into sleeping berths. Dining cars with white tablecloths and silverware. Observation cars with panoramic windows. Radka marveled. We boarded like tourists, not prisoners. Air conditioning. Luxury that he had thought existed only for Hitler's train. 3 days across Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky, every town, factory, and field displayed a level of efficiency and abundance they had never imagined. The prisoners' diaries overflowed with astonishment. Factories ran night shifts. Streets were alive with electricity. Houses burned brightly in multiple rooms. Parking lots teemed with cars. In Tennessee, the Alcoa aluminum plant stretched for miles along the river, consuming more power than all of Munich. Near Louisville, the rubber town complex churned out synthetic rubber at levels Germany had never reached. Prisoners watched the Willow Run bomber factory outside Detroit from miles away. One B-24 Liberator rolled off the assembly line every 63 minutes, built from 1,550,000 parts sourced from 1,500 subcontractors. Feldwebel Hutman Verli, Luftwaffe pilot shot down over Tunisia, pressed his face to the window. We had been told American planes were inferior, poorly made. I watched assembly lines, saw the precision, the quality. They weren't inferior, they were unimaginable. Across St. Louis, barges carried more grain than Germany's 1942 harvest. Kansas City stockyards teemed with tens of thousands of cattle, while prisoners who had eaten 200 grams of meat per week marveled at the abundance. The camp kitchens themselves were classrooms in American prosperity. Walk-in refrigerators, electric mixers, automated dishwashers, gas ranges capable of feeding 5,000 men, and daily rations that German civilians had not seen since 1939. Texas, 1943. Camp Hearn. Built in just 4 months, Camp Hearn housed 4,800 prisoners in conditions that surpassed most German civilian homes. Wooden barracks with electric lights, flush toilets, hot showers, and steam heat. The camp hospital stunned medical professionals among the prisoners. Lieutenant Col. Dr. Friedrich Bauer, chief surgeon of the 164th Light Division, found himself in a facility better equipped than most German hospitals. X-ray machines, surgical tools, penicillin, advanced medicines, all freely available even to minor infections. The camp kitchen taught lessons in both scale and efficiency. Prisoners assigned to cooking duties marveled at walk-in refrigerators, electric mixers, and automated dishwashers. Each meal served 5,000 men with fresh milk, eggs, meat, vegetables, and white bread, luxuries that many German civilians hadn't seen since before the war. Feldwebel Otto Krebs, former hotel chef, wrote, "Today we threw away more food than my family has seen in 3 years. Not spoiled, simply surplus. This was American standard procedure. I wept as I tossed perfectly good bread into the garbage." Labor in the heartland. By September 1943, the labor shortage in American agriculture required prisoners to work in fields and factories across the country. Blindfolds were unnecessary. The prisoners saw everything: endless fields of corn and wheat, factories running 3 shifts, towns teeming with goods, refrigerators in homes, radios playing news. At a cotton gin outside Houston, Herbert Lang from East Prussia watched a single machine process in an hour what his village could not handle in a month. Powered by electricity from the Colorado River Authority, the gin symbolized progress. 90% of Texas farms had electricity by 1943. In Nebraska, prisoners worked in sugar beet fields. One combined harvester did the work of 100 men. Fields stretched beyond comprehension. Farmers casually reported yields that would have been fantasy in Germany: 60 bushels per acre, double Germany's best. Teenage sons drove tractors worth more than their family's lifetime earnings, and this was considered ordinary. Factories and industrial observation. Thousands of prisoners worked in industries that freed American workers for military production. At a Campbell soup factory in New Jersey, Prisoners watched automated lines process more tomatoes in a single day than German factories handled in a month. A skeleton crew of women and elderly men ran machines that automated hundreds of steps, exceeding peacetime productivity. Near Detroit, the River Rouge complex operated day and night, producing jeeps, aircraft engines, and tanks. The plant consumed more electricity daily than Hamburg. Prisoners marveled at thousands of worker-owned cars, women running heavy machinery, and the efficiency of American labor systems. Education and re-education. By winter 1943, ideological collapse syndrome became evident. Prisoners began requesting access to newspapers, books, and educational materials. Over 40,000 enrolled in courses: English, history, math, science. Correspondence courses arrived from the University of Chicago and Stanford University, including lectures on democracy and economics. Camp newspapers shifted from nationalism to discussions about governance, post-war reconstruction, and civil rights. Humanity and morale. The treatment of Italian prisoners after Italy's surrender in September 1943 shocked German soldiers. Italians received better quarters, pay, and freedom. Germans watched allies who had once fought beside them being treated with dignity. Hetman Friedrich Schultz reflected, "The Italians betrayed us, yet they are treated better than we ever were as allies. Americans show them no hatred. This democracy is more honorable than our system." Christmas 1943 brought 500,000 care packages from American organizations, churches, and civic groups. Camp choirs performed German carols. Boy Scouts delivered cards. Prisoners received turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, pies, and ice cream, luxuries unimaginable in wartime Germany. Labor and industrial witnessing 1944. Prisoners participated in canneries, mills, fabrication plants. At Higgins Boat Factory in New Orleans, 700 landing craft were built monthly by 20,000 workers, including women. At Republic Steel in Ohio, 10,000 tons of steel were produced daily, more than entire rural German regions could ever produce. Midwestern farms displayed unprecedented efficiency. Kansas wheat farms produced